Surya Prakash ji kindly make his remarks.
Thank you very much, sir. Dr. Gupta, Gurumurthy ji, Govindacharya ji, and all our friends who are on this web conference. Every June brings back these terrible memories of the emergency. 45 years have gone by. But many of us who lived through that, who suffered that experience, and all of us who value our constitution and democratic way of life will never forget what happened. And we go on talking about it, writing about it, simply because I think it's very important for every generation to know what happened and how it happened, so that this kind of derailment of our democracy and our core values in our constitution will never happen in this country. I hold the view that we are the most diverse society in the world, also the most democratic, the most vibrant democratic society in the world. And this diversity demands that we remain an extremely plural society in every which way. Our political, whether it's our politics, our constitutional scheme, democratic way of life, and so on. So what happened in 75 was that there was the judgment of the Allahabad High Court, which had unseated Mrs. Gandhi, but she was determined to stay on in office, irrespective of what the court had said. And then she got a very partial stay from Supreme Court, which did not allow her to vote or speak in Parliament. Yet she was determined to stay on as Prime Minister, and she had to find a way. And that is how the whole process began. But before I go further, I think I'm very privileged to be here on this panel with two very eminent Indians who have done enormous service for this country and who are our anti-emergency yodhas, Govindacharya ji and Gurumurthy ji. Both of them were in the thick of it during the emergency, as Govindacharya ji was explaining, and have rendered enormous service so that we get back our democracy and our constitution. Also, this is time, I think, for us to remember Jaiprakash Narayan, Morarji Desai, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, L.K. Advani ji, Madhu Dandavate, George Fernandez, Chandrasekhar, a lot of them. In fact, Arun Jaitley was in jail for 19 months. Among the ministers today, for example, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was in the underground movement, and as Govindji was explaining, it was very important. What the RSS did was to take care of the families of those who were in jail, also to bring out our underground newspapers and so on. So that work was carried on by a lot of them, and Modi ji was one of those. Then you had ministers like Ravi Shankar Prasad, Ram Vilas Paswan, Prakash Javadekar, who were all in jail at that time. And our Vice President, Venkaiah Naidu ji, also in jail during emergency. Then Mr. Devegowda, Nitish Kumar ji, Lalu Prasad Yadav, Dr. Subramanya Swamy. I mean, there are a lot of people, but I'm just taking some of the names I can just recall offhand now. I think today is a day for us to remember them, because 19 months in jail is not a joke. And during the emergency, I know everyone was wondering whether they would survive at all, whether they would come out alive, whether India would ever get back its democracy and constitution. Those were the terrifying moments at that time. So therefore, I always remember these people with great respect for what they did for us. The other thing is, a lot has been written about the emergency. And in fact, 2 years ago, I brought out my book also. There have been other books and other authors. And a lot has been said about the emergency as well. Innocent people thrown in jail, bulldozing bastis, a slum clearance or beautification program which began in Delhi, caused enormous problems and to lakhs of people. Then the terrible Nasbandi program, the family program, where coercion was used to sterilize people, and so on and so forth. And of course, the police in various places, the police and sections of bureaucracy went totally berserk, taking law into their own hands. I have myself spoken about the emergency in many fora, and including the Vivekananda International Foundation, where I have spoken twice about it. So I will not go into all those parts regarding what happened in the parliament, the constitutional amendments, the whole issue between parliament and the judiciary, and the major issue between the attitude, the emergency regime's attitude towards media and so on, because I think those who are attending this webinar are fairly acquainted with that. So I thought today I will deal with primarily, apart from one or two other things, what happened on June 25, 1975. And I would like to confine myself to that largely in this little talk of mine. So it begins that morning when Indira Gandhi summons Siddharth Shankar Ray, was the Chief Minister of West Bengal, and says, Siddharth, you've got to find a way, because I think the country needs a shock treatment. And you got to find a way, what am I supposed to do? So after some hours, he went back to the Prime Minister's house. He said, there is Article 352, which you can apply when there is internal disturbance to impose an emergency. So she said, that's fine, and consulted one or two others, and then straight went to the president with Siddharth Shankar Ray that evening. Just around the time we are holding this webinar 45 years ago, she was with the president and saying, Mr. President, you have to sign this proclamation. President Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad said, yes, you please send the papers and I will sign it. And they were coming back. While they were coming back, Siddharth Shankar Ray told her, you better consult some other leaders, meaning some other senior members of the cabinet and so on. But she told him, no question at all, I am not going to consult the cabinet. I don't want to consult anybody. I will go to the president. I want him to sign the order and clamp the emergency. So she did not trust her own cabinet colleagues. She said, I'll call the cabinet next morning, but you find a way how I can do it. So Siddharth Shankar Ray told her, there are three ways of doing these things. One is, these are items which need clearance of the cabinet before you can bring it, before you can issue a notification. The second category is those things that do not need to go to the cabinet. And then there is a third category where you as Prime Minister can take a decision and post facto go to the cabinet and get its clearance. So she said, I want the third variety. So you prepare the papers in that way. Meanwhile, Sanjay Gandhi, R.K. Dhawan and Om Mehta, who was Minister of State for Home Affairs, were busy drawing up list of leaders who were to be arrested that night. So she did not consult anybody, but since Siddharth Shankar Ray told her, you better consult some senior people, she called Devkant Barua, who at that time was the president of the party, and told him, this is what I'm planning to do, and asked him to stay back in the house, and said, work with Siddhartha and prepare the text of my speech, which I have to deliver on All India Radio next morning. So that exercise went on till about 3 in the morning of June 26th. Then what happens? As that work on the speech ended, Siddharth Shankar Ray was ready to go out, probably go back to his house. And that's when Om Mehta buttonholed him and told him, Arey sir, I don't know if you are aware, but the first program in the morning is to lock up all the high courts in the country and to, right now, to switch off electricity to all newspapers. So Siddharth Shankar Ray has told the Shah Commission, which investigated the excesses of the emergency, that he was quite horrified to hear all this. And immediately he said, I want to see the Prime Minister. By then she had retired. It was already past 3 o'clock. She was to meet the cabinet at 6 a.m. But he insisted that he see her. So probably she was resting and she had to come out and said, so what's the matter? Why are you wanting to see me at this hour? So he said, have you heard that they are going to lock up all the high courts tomorrow morning? What is all this going on? So in the meanwhile, when he was waiting for her, word went round that Siddharth Shankar Ray was very angry. So Sanjay Gandhi came out and gave him a blasting. That is what he has informed the Shah Commission. And then he said, "You people do not know how to run the country." And he was very angry and he went away. Then Indira Gandhi turned up. Then she said, "Siddhartha, don't worry. The courts will not be locked up tomorrow morning, and the electricity to newspapers will not be cut." Of course, that did not happen. The newspapers along Bahadur Shah Zafar Marg, their electricity was cut off that night, so that none of those papers could be published next morning. But luckily for us, no, the Congress, Youth Congress or whatever, didn't go and lock the gates of all the high courts in the country. Anyway, meanwhile, she had decided not to contact anyone, but she had to talk to the Home Minister because there are a letter which had to go from the Home Minister to the President. So Brahmanand Reddy was Home Minister, was summoned at 10:30 in the night and given a sheet of paper with a letter to the President on a plain sheet of paper. It was not even, later we realized it was not even on his letterhead. And he signed it and that was sent to the President. And when it reached the president, Mr. K. Balachandran, who was secretary to the president, has told the Shah Commission what happened. He advised the president not to sign. He said that because it was worded in such a manner as it would appear that the decision to declare the emergency was that of the president based on his personal satisfaction. So he said, "Sir, you just cannot do this. It will have to be worded differently." Secondly, he said, "You are to be guided by the Council of Ministers. So please ask the Prime Minister to go to the Council of Ministers and get authorization from the Council of Ministers." So the president said, "Okay, I will see what I can do." Meanwhile, the moment Indira Gandhi heard about this Rukavat, she sent R.K. Dhawan to the president. 10 minutes after R.K. Dhawan met him, the president signed the order, the proclamation, and it came into being. The other thing that happened was, it was quite hilarious that, the cabinet secretary is the head of the civil service in the country. His name was B.D. Pandey. He knew nothing about what is going on and about the cabinet meeting. So he was woken up at 4:30 and said, "There is a cabinet meeting at 6 o'clock in the Prime Minister's house. You will end up there." The Home Secretary, poor man, S.L. Khurana was his name. He gets a call at 6 o'clock. He jumped out of his bed when he heard that the cabinet is on and he is wanted there in the Prime Minister. Then there was the Chief of Intelligence Bureau, Atma Jairam. This poor man, he is the head of the Intelligence Bureau in the country. He reached his office at 10 in the morning and heard that an emergency has been clamped and the President has issued the proclamation. This was the level of secrecy. And of course, the Law Minister, Gokhale, he heard of this when he reached the Prime Minister's house at 6 a.m. So this is how the whole thing panned out that morning and that night. And it was really a very grim situation when the cabinet was on, and later we heard nobody said anything. I think either Mr. Swaran Singh or somebody had some innocuous question to ask. All other ministers just shut up and were absolutely quiet because by then they realized that if any of them opened their mouth or raised any issue regarding the decision taken by the Prime Minister, there was every danger of them also landing up in Tihar jail along with Jaiprakash Narayan and their political opponents. So all of them kept quiet. And so therefore this emergency was clamped. It went on for 21 months. And the government of India was not involved. It was the kitchen cabinet of Indira Gandhi, this coterie around her in her house. They sat and worked out the whole thing. And then it led to various things. The next day they clamped press censorship and appointed chief censors in every state. And then they brought in a law which empowered district magistrates to raid newspapers and to just stop publication of newspapers if the district magistrate felt that there was something which was going to be put out which would disturb public order. So this is how it all happened that day. And there were terrible consequences of this derailment of democracy. You see, once democracy derails, anything can happen. So, for example, what happened in the habeas corpus case? You see, in that case, the issue was whether the government said that the president had suspended our fundamental right to equality before law and the equal protection law and fundamental right, Article 21, that is the right to life and personal liberty, that we did not have these rights in view of the presidential proclamation, and he had suspended those rights. That was the issue before the Supreme Court. And Supreme Court heard all that. And then there were 5 judges, A. N. Chief Justice. Then you had Justice Khanna, Beg, Chandrachud, and Bhagwati. During the hearing, Khanna asked the Attorney General Nirende, Mr. Attorney General, suppose a policeman were to shoot dead a citizen in the police station, is there no remedy? Because you say Article 21, right to life and personal liberty is suspended. Nirende said, his answer was, it shocks my conscience, my lord, it may shock yours. But I must say there is no remedy. There is no remedy so long as the president's proclamation is in force. So after that, Khanna dissented. This was in August 1975 and in 76 and in 77 January, when the government had to choose the next Chief Justice and he was the senior most judge, he was superseded, and then Justice Beg went on to become the Chief Justice. Also Chandrachud and Bhagwati. All the judges who let us down in regard to this particular case, in regard to protection of our fundamental rights and right to life and personal liberty, all of them went on to become Chief Justices and so on and so forth. Now, another interesting aspect of that case, which I wish to recall, is one paragraph of what Justice Beg said in his judgment in the habeas corpus says. He says, we understand that the care and concern bestowed by the state authorities upon the welfare of detainees who are well fed and well treated is almost maternal. That is, the judge is saying, Indira Gandhi, like a mother, is taking good care of you in the jails, and you are well fed and well taken care of. And then he says, even parents have to take appropriate preventive action against those children who may threaten to burn down the house. So this was his explanation for declining us our right to life and personal liberty. So this is what happened vis-a-vis the habeas corpus case. And then as far as Nasbandi is concerned, it was one of the most atrocious things, because everywhere the chief ministers were given quotas by Sanjay Gandhi. He called meetings, he met chief ministers, and he gave quotas to all chief ministers and said, now listen, this is what you have to do in the state in regard to sterilizing men and women. What did the chief ministers do? They just passed on the quotas to their chief secretaries and to their IG of police and so on. So as a result, it came right down the line to your PWD inspectors, police constables, school teachers. Every school teacher had a quota to find people for Nasbandi. So policemen would roam around in their jeeps and look out for people and nab them and take them to primary health centers for vasectomy operations. And so, for example, there were a lot of cases before Shah Commission, I recall. For example, in Azamgarh, 2 Muslim teachers said that they will not undergo vasectomy. The district magistrate straight away arrested them under Misa and put them in. Then they said, what do we do now? So they said, you undergo vasectomy and you will be out. So they went to the primary health center, offered themselves, brought the certificates, gave it to the district magistrate, and then they were released from jail. So there were hundreds of cases like this. And the most terrible thing was the story of the village Uthawar, which is in Haryana, where I live these days. In Uttar village, Bansilal ordered the police. They just surrounded the entire village, largely comprising of Muslims, and they nabbed all males from 8 to 80, took them to a primary health center in Noo, and had them vasectomized. And then they were all brought back and dumped back in the village. All these stories were the horrors of the emergency which came before the Shah Commission. The other thing I want to say is that among political prisoners, Goenji was talking about the role of the RSS. I must say that the Shah Commission, finally, with the figures that were put out there, 3,254 members of the RSS were arrested under MISA, 772 from the Jansang. From the CPML, there were 766, CPM 81, and the Samajwadi Party, two variants of it, 225. So, apart from political leaders who were arrested, there were a lot of people from RSS and other political organizations who were all active at that time in protest against the emergency and who were taken in. I must also say that another funny thing happened at that time because I was a correspondent in Indian Express. The chief censors everywhere in all the states and in Delhi imposed a ban on censor parliament proceedings. They would decide what part of the proceedings we could report and what part we could not report. I'll give you an example of why they were doing that in a few minutes. Same thing with High Courts and Supreme Court. In fact, the correspondents who went to High Court and Supreme Court, they were told by censors, today's judgment you should not report. And so the censorship extended to the courts, judiciary, parliament, and so on. And therefore, the whole network of what I would call dictatorship, it was a fascist regime. It's an authentic fascist regime. And then the 42nd Amendment was brought in Parliament in order to show the judiciary its place. They wanted to curb the powers of the High Court and Article 226 and of the Supreme Court and so on. They brought the 42nd Amendment. I'll just read out one or two MPs what they said in Parliament about that 42nd Amendment when it was being passed. Swaran Singh said, we cannot shirk that responsibility. That is, of amending the Constitution as and when we want. We should not at all be apologetic about changing the Constitution. Then NKP Salve said, in the life of our every nation, there comes a time when the Constitution has to be saved from the court and the court from itself. And then comes this quote from CM Stephen. He said, now the power of this parliament through the 42nd Amendment is declared to be out of bounds for any court. It is left to the courts whether they should defy it. I do not know whether they will have the temerity to do that. But if they do, that will be a bad day for the judiciary. The committee of the House is sitting with regard to inquiry into the conduct of judges. And we have got our methods, our machinery. In other words, he was holding a direct threat to the judges of the Supreme Court, saying, don't come and impose these restrictions on us. We know what to do. A committee of parliament is looking at your conduct, and we know how to fix all of you judges. And this was the kind of threat that was openly held out in parliament. That's why I said they were censoring parliament proceedings because they did not want all these things to be reported by the media at that time. Finally, I must say that the sycophants in the party, they were saying Indra is India and India is Indra. And they kept saying, you are totally invincible. You have put all your opponents in jail. So you can win an election anytime and nobody can stop you. And of course, the Intelligence Bureau feeding us with all kinds of stories about how the people were very happy with the emergency. Trains are running on time. All officers are coming to all government servants are coming to the office on time. So this is an excellent time for you to hold an election, because she wanted electoral legitimacy for her dictatorship. She wanted electoral, also across the world there were attacks on her. So she wanted electoral legitimacy for her dictatorship. And so she thought this is a good idea to going for elections, because the opposition is non-existent. They are all in jail. She released the opposition leader just before the elections. But the RSS and so many other political activities, including the socialists and others, had done so much field work, quiet work, that they were able to put together a ragtag coalition within a matter of 8-10 days and go to the people. And as the campaign built up, they realized the kind of anger that was there in the people against the Indira Gandhi dictatorship. And so, in no time, when the boxes opened, Indira Gandhi was flabbergasted, because the party was completely wiped out in central and north India, except for 2 seats out of about 350 seats. And she won a lot of seats in the south, but she was in the opposition. Janata Party won handsomely in that election. And she won in the south because Chief Minister Devaraj and other chief ministers there did not do these crazy things like the chief ministers in the north. For example, as I told you, Sanjay Gandhi imposed quota. So as a result, the chief minister of Uttar Pradesh, for example, Sanjay Gandhi gave him a quota of 4 lakh sterilizations in the year. The chief minister, after 10 days, announced, I will do 15 lakhs in order to win the favor, to curry favor with Indira Gandhi and Sanjay Gandhi. And then so 15 lakh quota was imposed on the state, and the state machinery went berserk trying to fulfill that quota. Unlike these chief ministers, in the south, things were not so bad. And anyway, she won seats in the south, but she was completely wiped out in the north and central India and so on. And the Janata Party came to power and had to undo all the damage of the 42nd Amendment. In fact, last point on 42nd Amendment, she amended the constitution to say there is no need for quorum in parliament. This, I think, is a totally frightening amendment, because 2 MPs could go there and make law for all of us. The other amendment she made in the 42nd Amendment was to give the president the power through an executive order to amend the constitution. This only Hitler had done in 1933. So thankfully, the 44th Amendment removed all this and restored our democracy. And we have Gurumurthy ji, Govindacharya ji, and all those people who I named today, who have done enormous work at that time to restore democracy in this country. We have, what I will say finally is that none of those individuals who did all this zulm at that time ever apologized for what they did. And there is no prashchit, there is no saying sorry. And so therefore, I say, do not forget and do not forgive and do not forget the emergency. We in India have a strange attitude. We forget and we forgive also, even though no forgiveness is sought. I find this to be a very strange attitude in this country. We should not forget, we should not forgive. And then, last point from Dr. Ambedkar, he said, no man should be grateful at the cost of his honor. You know, Indra is India, this, that, and the other. And everyone was saying, without you, the country will not exist. That kind of attitude, which led Indira Gandhi onto the wrong path. He said, no man should be grateful at the cost of his honor, and no nation should be grateful at the cost of its sovereignty. We must always remember this, so that we never, ever have any trace of fascism again in this country. So thank you, Dr. Gupta, and everyone who was listening to this lecture.
Thank you, Surya Prakash ji, for recalling the horrors of those times and also underlining some lessons which are also very important.